So there's so much to talk about. I'll jump right into it. Now, I tried to read as many negative reviews of Ready Player One as possible, and I think there's 4 main criticisms, and I'll try to address each one of them. The first would be about gatekeeper mentality, and this has to do with the idea of fake gamers and fake comic book fans. Second is the idea of presenting a virtual reality heavy world where virtual reality is a big thing, as being somewhat ambivalent about it. That, yeah, maybe people should go outside a little more, but there's nothing inherently wrong or problematic with virtual reality, versus presenting a world dominated by virtual reality as purely dystopian. The third would be the idea that nerds are no longer really underdogs. Nerd culture is dominant. Nerds are the new jocks, the new kings. So having any kind of movie that presents a protagonist who's a nerd is just inherently problematic. Fourth would be just critiques of nostalgia movies and Easter egg heavy movies in general. So the first criticism, that this promotes a gatekeeper mentality, there's one interaction in particular where Wade says, a gamer can always tell a hater, a gamer can always tell a fake, something along those lines. And he also seems to be testing someone else's knowledge and testing to see if they're real and authentic. Now, I think that there's a huge difference between, if there's a social situation and everyone's talking and someone says, oh, I really like this, or I'm a fan of this, and then someone else in the circle starts asking them questions to try to test to see if they're a real fan. That's shitty. That's gatekeeper mentality, and that seems to be implying that unless you've seen this many things, if you're a new fan, you have to lurk more. You shouldn't be allowed to talk and start to be part of the conversation until you've been initiated, reach a certain level. And I think that that's shitty to some extent and wrong, but I think that that's not what's happening here. In the interaction, it's a corporate guy pretending to be something he's not, pretending to care about something that he doesn't, in order to manipulate someone. And if you can't call that out, if you can't call out fake people who pretend to be something they're not, and appropriate and use things that they don't really care about, and pretend to manipulate people for money, for profit, if you can't call out fakeness, I think that that's just a tough sell. And I think a big part of it is how you present yourself, how you market yourself. So I made an explanation video about an anime a couple weeks ago. I got some dislikes, a few negative comments, but for the most part a positive response. And if someone had come onto that video and commented, hey, have you seen this anime? If you haven't seen this, this, and this, then you really shouldn't be even making a video about this. That's shitty. That's gatekeeper mentality, because I'm not claiming to be an expert in anime or this anime super fan. I just saw an anime I liked and threw up a video explaining it. Now, however, if my channel name was The Anime Guy, and my channel banner had a bunch of images from different famous animes, and it became apparent that I hadn't actually watched them, and I'd only seen the 3 or 4 popular Netflix animes that came out, and I made videos right after they came out to try to get views, but had no interest hadn't seen and never really intended to see any of these other animes that I was using. And when I'm talking in my video, I throw images from Death Note behind me, Bleach, and then it becomes apparent I haven't seen those. If someone comes in the comments and says, you know, you shouldn't really call yourself the anime guy, and you shouldn't really take these identities that have power and take these images and just use them when you don't really care, I don't think that's gatekeeper mentality. That's just calling someone out for kind of being a fake and kind of being shady. And this isn't just specific to nerd culture. The YouTube fitness community is huge. If someone starts a channel, hardcore bodybuilding, and especially if they start selling a training program that's going to get you jacked, and they don't have any kind of physique, they never upload videos of themselves working out, all they do is talk about bodybuilding and sell their product, and someone calls them out on it and says, hey, you're not really a bodybuilder, you never seem like you go to the gym or even care, all you care about is talking about these things, using all these buzzwords and selling your product and making money. Is that gatekeeper mentality? Is that saying, well, what are you saying, only people who look a certain way are allowed to make money off of fitness, selling fitness programs? And again, if you have a personal vlog and you upload videos of yourself working out, and someone comes on your channel and makes a comment, says, oh, you don't lift enough weight, you shouldn't even be making videos. Yeah, that's shitty. That's gatekeeper mentality, because they're not branding themselves as anything. They just have a personal channel, that they like to work out, they like to upload videos, they're not claiming to be anything. But as soon as you start to make a channel name hardcore bodybuilding, as soon as you start to try to monetize and make money off of it, I think that you do open yourself up to criticism. And nothing about this is specific to nerd culture. So if you call yourself a goth, if you call yourself a stoner, if you start a YouTube channel, Stoner Thoughts, and you constantly talk about how you're this big stoner, and people who watch the channel, they got the sense that you never smoke weed, and they criticize you for that. Is that a gatekeeper mentality? Oh, so what? Now everybody who calls himself a stoner has to smoke weed? Well, yeah, to some extent. Does everybody who calls themselves a stoner, do they have to smoke weed every day and be the most hardcore stoner imaginable? No, there can be people who are more casual, but there has to be some minimum standard of membership for you to use this label, or else just open yourself up to criticism. And I guess, could you be an honorary stoner and someone who doesn't smoke weed but still has the same mindset, so other people consider you an honorary stoner? I guess, but for the most part, smoking weed is part of being a stoner. So I think you have to draw a distinction between someone who's new in something and is learning and starting out, and other people being a dick to them because they're starting out and they're new. That's a completely different thing than someone who's pretending to be someone they're not, pretending to know things they don't know for bad reasons. And in Ready Player One, like I say, it's clearly this latter case. And I think the big villain in Ready Player One, it's this kind of corporate appropriation of a kind of cultural capital, and it's taking these beloved things, people who don't appreciate them, who only see them in terms of dollars and profits, and mining them in the same way that corporations, you can mine a lake and a natural resource and just take it for everything it's worth, ruin it, and then the corporation doesn't care because they feel no attachment to that. Then once it's not profitable, they just move on to the next thing. So it's like they can look at a franchise, and all they care about is what's going to make the most money on the next movie. Appealing to the foreign market, okay, check. Killing off a major character, okay, check. So they do those things, they make their money, and then long term the franchise just tanks and doesn't have any longevity. They don't care. They say, look, there's lots of superheroes out there. We'll just move on to the next superhero. We'll just move on. We'll do Wrinkle in Time next, and we'll do Black Panther. There's lots of stuff we can do. So I think that's what the movie is criticizing. Clearly, it's this kind of corporate appropriation of culture and the problematic aspects of that. It has nothing to do with just shitting on people who don't know as much as of other people and are just starting out in their journey of learning about these things. And then another criticism is that it's wrong to glorify people who have this encyclopedic knowledge of lore and mythology, and it's wrong to in any sense rank people in terms of how much they know, and to say that the people who know more are in some sense superior or better. And in principle, yes, but there was this quote I read where they said, in this universe, the smartest, strongest, and sexiest are those who know the most esoteric knowledge. Yeah, as opposed to what? The real world, where the strongest, the smartest, and the sexiest are those who are born with good genetics and happen to be conventionally attractive. Like, how is that any better? How is ranking people in terms of attractiveness, personality, money, any of the other things we rank, or conventional knowledge, school academic performance, how is ranking people in terms of that any better than ranking people in terms of how much they know about a given fandom? Now, in some sense, ranking people on how much they know about a given fandom is better because theoretically that has more to do with actually how much you care about something, how much effort you put into something. That's far superior to, I'd say, ranking people on something like looks or even personality, which is largely, you can work on it a bit, but that's largely something you're born with. So if you want to critique the entire existence of competitiveness at all, the entire existence of ranking people, of having exclusion and cliques, of course, yeah, hypothetically, in a hypothetical world, it would be great if there was no sense of ranking people and saying one person's better than the other. But every group and every society, there's always some yardstick we use to pick our friends, to pick which people we look up to and value. So suddenly when nerds in geek culture, they have their yardstick, which is knowledge of lore and these things, suddenly it becomes problematic. And there's no criticism of just every other group that sets its standards for how they're going to judge people. There's no criticism of that. It's just when nerds do it that suddenly it becomes horrible. And then the second major criticism is that anytime we see a virtual reality saturated society depicted in art, it's always depicted in dystopian terms. And there's this privileging of the real over any kind of digital or any kind of virtual, any kind of other reality. And I think this is just fundamental to a lot of people's thinking about society and the way the world works. And in this movie here, they seem to be somewhat ambivalent. So in the end, what the decision was, they didn't shut down the virtual reality. They just said, well, let's use it a little less. Let's try to go aside a little more. But definitely it didn't seem, and it seemed like the society, everyone spent a lot of time in this virtual reality. The streets were kind of falling into disrepair. But I don't know if you could really watch this movie and say it really seemed like a dystopia. It didn't seem like a hellish place. It seemed like kind of a cool place that I wouldn't mind going to. So some people look at that and they say, well, this is problematic because people who play video games, people who spend a lot of time on the internet, people who dream of someday spending time in virtual reality, that's bad. That's escapism, and that's not facing reality. That's not coping with reality. And maybe it's fine to play video games or be in a virtual reality for a couple hours a week, maybe, but real life, you gotta spend time outside with other people. You gotta go out to dinner. You gotta go to your 9-to-5 job. And any kind of art or movie that seems to say, well, no, maybe there's another way to live, and maybe a world of virtual reality could become so immersive and could become so complex that it could be just as fulfilling and just as satisfying as real life. And that's a pretty radical idea that I think a lot of people intuitively have this knee-jerk reaction to. Now, what I would say to that is, when people say, well, obviously virtual reality is not the real world, like the real world is what matters because it's real, it's cliche, reality's reality. You say that, and a lot of you think you say that because, oh, it's just this philosophical objective reality principle. No, you say that because you have certain privileges in reality where you are born with certain advantages. So for you, it's easy for you to buy into this notion that reality is primal, and any kind of virtual reality where suddenly these advantages you have, they're equalized. So suddenly when everyone can pick their avatar, the way you were born and your looks and something that you take a lot of pride in, suddenly that's equalized and everyone can look however they want, and suddenly all these things that you value and you care about so much and you were lucky enough to be born into, these things don't matter so much. So you create this philosophical idea of the primacy of reality and the real world and how that's important, and any other kind of world someone creates, whether that's a digital world, a digital community on the internet, you're able to devalue that and say, well, internet friends aren't real friends, virtual realities, those aren't real realities. And you think it's because of some kind of logic or principles. No, it's just your own biases that you happen to be fine with reality, and you happen to like the reality, and you happen to come out on top in the reality that we happen to have all been born into. So you see any kind of other reality that you might not have those same advantages, and other people who are below you in this reality, now in this virtual reality, they're either equal to you or on top of you. So, you really just want to maintain your advantage, and that's where this kind of hatred of virtual reality comes from a lot of the time. Okay, so third major criticism is that geeks have tremendous privilege and power now in society, so any kind of movie that depicts them as underdogs is anachronistic. I don't know, they would probably say geeks have always had incredible power and privilege, so anything that depicts them as underdogs is inherently wrong. And the proof of this is that, geeks have taken over the entertainment industry, and you see that by the good box office results of Star Wars, a lot of superhero movies. Now, there's just a really bad argument, because if you look at, let's say, The Last Jedi or Black Panther, it's a bunch of non-geeks who are the directors, the everyone working on the movie, the producers, everyone making money off the movie, casting a bunch of non-geeks. None of the actors you would call them geeks, and they're making the movie. Their target audience is not geeks either. If you look at the audience reactions to The Last Jedi, for instance, the audience reaction, the geeks, the people who actually grew up with this stuff, they hate the movie, and they vocalize their displeasure, and the people behind the movie say they don't care, say this is the direction, we don't care about the negative fan response. So in what way is that geeks winning? Like, in their mind, this is geeks dominating the culture, having people who aren't geeks take their culture, twist it to something that they don't like, and sell it and make money off of it. And in some sense, this is geeks being dominant and being privileged. And I don't know how else to describe it. It's the definition of cultural appropriation. It's when you have something that has always been used by a certain group of people, has never been cool, never been popular, and then you have people with a lot of power and with a lot of privilege taking that, using it, and all of a sudden now it's cool and now it's trendy, and they use it without really understanding it, without understanding why the people originally cared about it. They use it, becomes really trendy, it makes them a lot of money, and then it becomes not trendy and cool, and they toss it away and they move on to the next thing. It's exactly what cultural appropriation is. And they say, I read in one article, they said, well, now dressing up dressing up in Star Wars stuff, now it's cool. It's cool if you're conventionally attractive. It's cool, but if you're unattractive and you dress up like that, no one's gonna think it's cool. They're gonna tease you and make fun of you. So again, it's the definition of cultural appropriation, where it's people when they're not in the community and they dress up with this stuff. Now suddenly it's cool, but when the people that have always been doing it do it, they're made fun of for it. So just like no one would say that because Black Panther did great at the box office, or because Beyonce is this mega superstar, no one would argue that because of that, Black people are ascendant and they're dominant in the culture and Black people aren't underdogs. I don't understand how people make the argument that because some aspects of geek culture are very popular, that means geeks are now the new jocks, and they dominate high schools and they dominate college and they dominate these other environments. No, so just because a culture has been appropriated and is being exploited and used to great effect, that doesn't mean that the original people who came up with that culture, it doesn't mean that they're now reaping the benefits of that. Again, it's cultural appropriation just 101. Now, the other criticism that Wade is white male. First of all, like, the source material is that, so that's like, why? Now, if you argue that that we need to have more balance, that it's always white males that are the leads in these kind of movies, it's just a bad time to make that argument, because if you look at just what's come out in the sci-fi superhero genre just these last couple of months, Black Panther, obviously, Wrinkle in Time, a Black female lead, largely female and minority cast. Annihilation, all-female cast, a female lead. Pacific Rim had a black male lead. So if you're arguing for balance and, we need to have more balance, it's just a bad time to make that argument. If you argue that we should never have a white male lead, and it's just inherently bad optics to ever have a white male hero of a story, we can debate. I guess I can't argue with that position, and that's fine. So if you're making that argument, fine. But if you're making the argument, it's white males are overrepresented in the genre as male leads, I guess maybe historically, but as far as of late, not really. This video is getting really long, so I'll do my last point quickly. I think if you want to make a general argument against having movies and TV shows where rather than coming up with new stuff, you just do either crossovers or either callbacks of these beloved characters, I think you could argue that it's less risky than coming up with a new character. If you come up with a new character, you don't really know how fans are going to respond. But if you bring back an old character, a beloved character, you know that probably the response is going to be positive. So it's a low-risk strategy, and also it probably takes less cost and less work. Obviously, you probably conceptually, you don't have to do as much work to bring back this new character. You don't have to do as much work with design. So this kind of nostalgia programming, it's in some sense very profitable. So I think there is the danger of corporations using these kind of Easter eggs rather than coming up with new stuff, and they can spin it as, oh, they just love these franchise elements so much, and that's why they keep bringing back these characters, doing crossovers, when in reality it's just more of a cynical money decision. So I think that is a fair criticism. I think this movie was awesome. I loved all the Easter eggs. I thought it was great, but I think as far as a general trend, we could see more and more of this kind of recycling of content because of monetary considerations.